Good viewer, you are watching Xirtus. This is because Xirtus makes you feel good, makes you feel fulfilled. You are enjoying this. You will continue to watch Xirtus for a long time to come. You want to subscribe to Xirtus, and you will. You will like and subscribe and share. You will tell your friends. Tell your friends about Xirtus. Your friends will come to like Xirtus, much as you are liking this right now, as we speak. Thank you for subscribing to Xirtus. See, that was easy.
Hello. Welcome to the Xirtus.
Well, I've never been so autocritical of myself as I am now after watching that, considering that we have a true artist with us, Nina Paley, someone who is super based. I remember first finding out about you through Nina's Adventures, which are just like two real truths about life in Santa Cruz, amongst other places. But you think that the whole world's like Santa Cruz until you find out it's not. So that was helpful. Thank you so much for that. And then also my grandmother's from Urbana, so that was super based to find out that like other cool things happened in Urbana. Actually, I'm pretty stoked on that. That's a random connection. But you came through Santa Cruz, you made Sita Sings the Blues, which I was watching on archive.org for just like, I was like, oh, I vowed
Sita, not Santa.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You said Sita.
I mean,
oh, did you? Oh, I heard Santa because I was just hearing Santa Cruz. I'm sorry. I'll shut up.
It's okay. I showed that movie. I showed that movie to my 90-year-old grandmother because I was just like, and she loved it. It's like one of the last things we did with each other. It was like one of her favorite movies that she ever saw. So thank you so much for making this amazing story where you interviewed people about different perspectives about the Ramayana, and then you went on to do Seder-Masochism, which is, you know, we do a show on synchronicities, and I say that's one of the most densely synchronistic movies that we've seen, and I just really love it. And the fact that you do these things for copyleft so that people could learn from them, make from them, it's just such an important inspiration. So thank you for being here. All right, I'm done. Sorry.
Super nice. Thank you. How is Santa Cruz right now?
So
2024.
Technically, I'm in Minnesota this week. I came to visit my girlfriend, so I'm not in Santa Cruz for a little while, but it's all right. Actually, Santa Cruz is doing okay, and there's some good art there. How's it going, David? You're there still.
I'm in Santa Cruz. It's holding up as well as it can. Under the circumstances, it's doing pretty well for itself, I'd say.
What are the circumstances? I mean, I can guess what the circumstances
ongoing circumstances. I've been like kind of surprised by a lot of people that I've known through the years and how they're dealing with kind of the neuroses that come with the times, you know. So, but I'd say holding up, you know. I think I relate to like the Ents in Lord of the Rings, like the way that like they're just there, and then it's like until it gets to a certain point and they're called upon. Like a lot of us, like very old school Santa Cruz people, are kind of like, we're keeping Santa Cruz weird. And you know, we don't necessarily put ourselves out there as much until it really comes down to it, like what happened for the Ents.
I don't even know what Ents are. So
They're like the tree people in Lord of the Rings that like kind of like step up when it's like, okay, I guess it's come to this, you know. So
Yeah.
wait,
Go ahead. Sorry.
were you born in Santa Cruz?
yeah, born and
Oh
raised.
wow, so you're like real Santa Cruz
I think
denizens.
I'm technically born in Santa Clara, but I lived all my life in Santa Cruz.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Mainly because my mom worked at the Dominican hospital, so she wanted to. I don't know what that was about. She wanted to go to a different hospital, but yeah.
I'm just now finding out that Santa Cruz is, I guess, a city and not just a skateboard company.
Right. It's actually it's the dream sequence from Being John Malkovich where he goes into his own head and they're just like Malkovich, Santa Cruz, Santa Cruz. It's the same vibe. It's pretty crazy.
I was in Sweden back in was it 2018 or something like that, and I saw these skateboarders with like a half pipe, and they were all like there was like 3 guys all wearing Santa Cruz stuff, like one with a sweater and whatever, and I was like, hey guys, I'm from Santa Cruz, and they literally said to me in English, they go, we don't give a fuck, and I was like that's so cool. Like that's exactly what they were supposed to say to that. Keep up the good work, guys. You know?
So, but you came to Santa Cruz, right? Like, so you start like, so my grandmother and like when I visit Urbana, Champaign, places in Illinois, it's different than Santa Cruz. It doesn't have as many Ewoks. The Quakers are awesome and Catfish Lakes are great, but it's like few and far between in certain respects. Things have changed. So what led you like, and also mathematician father, right? Like what did you come from that led you to think in the ways you do and, you know, to be interested in this art?
Yeah, well, I went to Santa Cruz because I wanted to be a new age crystal wielding hippie.
Right. Yeah.
And I got disabused of that after about 3 months. So what I realized is I wasn't a hippie, I was a contrarian. And in 1987 in central Illinois, being a hippie was being a contrarian. But then I went to Santa Cruz and everyone was a hippie. And I was like, I just found myself pushing against it. I was like, I mean, after a while, at first, I didn't really know what was happening. Like, I thought I would be happy, and instead, I can't stand these people.
You know what? For the most part, there's very few actual hippies here. What there's yuppies, and there's also like the term hippie is such a blanket term. When what it used to mean was people who were doing farming, who had like basically like land shares and were like really like in touch with the earth. And then San Francisco, you know, all these people flocked to San Francisco, and that was like the hippie movement. But a lot of the discrimination against hippies that existed in the 1960s, right, was largely just people afraid of communism, and to view a commune as commune and communism just like went together in people's heads. So they're just like, we got to stop these commies. You know, so, you know,
and Santa Cruz had the extreme right, which is weird to remember. But if you read like newspapers and you see that we had like the KKK and like crazy like marches in the streets in the 60s and 50s and things, Santa Cruz came from a really conservative place that they put a university in. So there's a weird dynamic that, you know, like I guess any town.
Right. It's all the damn vampires. That's the problem.
True. That's the problem.
It's not the hippies, it's the vampires.
I didn't come there for the vampires, but I loved all the, you know, organic food, vegetarian. Like vegetarianism was super obscure where I grew up. It isn't now, but it was. And yeah, I had all those hippie dreams of living in a commune and living on the land and all that stuff. But a couple months in Santa Cruz, I stopped.
How receptive were the hippies to your contrarianism?
Well, I mean, what I found there was this pressure to conform, and I was extremely sensitive to the judgment of not conforming. Like there was a credit union I was supposed to bank at, and if they found out I wasn't banking at the credit union,
being a hippie. Okay, you have to open up a bank account.
Well, at the credit union, see, I was using capitalist money and they were using hippie money, which was better. Yeah, things like that. Like I perceived a kind of rigidity that frightened me and a pressure to conform that made me very uneasy. And that was when I learned the word politically correct
Right.
back then. So yeah, my discomfort just sort of grew as it was kind of, people were kind of culty, I guess.
Yeah. So you've been politically incorrect for a long time.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, just a contrarian. That's just my nature. And I can only hope to be in environments where a little intellectual diversity is tolerated, if not appreciated. But those places are few and far between.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of times, I don't know, I don't think it's as true as it used to be, but a lot of times when they wanted to pass something that might be challenging that they don't think that they'll be able to get like liberals to agree to, they'll start it in Santa Cruz because they're like, if they can pass it here, they can pass it everywhere. And so I don't, like I say, I don't know about now, but I know traditionally that was a thing. It's like, well, we'll test it here. So Santa Cruz is like largely a testing ground in that way and in other ways too, just to see how will these people respond. But I don't think Santa Cruz is as liberal as it used to be. If you're talking like neocon and we're calling things by the same name, now that the goalposts have shifted, maybe that's something else. But yeah.
Yeah, I remember I was really anti-cop when I lived in Santa Cruz. And I did comics for the Santa Cruz Comic News. And one day I like self-righteously went in there and was like, cops, terrible cops. And Tom Sajak said, well, I appreciate the cops. I actually want my property protected. And I was like, hey, the man did. So I've been, young and dumb and had different ideas. I've changed over the years. But yeah, I did the hippie thing as well as I could. And I got most of my ideas from other people, which I'm acutely aware of now. Now that I am critical of people not thinking for themselves, but I did plenty of that in my younger day. And I still do, right? Like there's so little that I've actually thought out for myself. Very few things. The few things that I have thought out for myself, I assert and get in trouble for, but most things really I don't know, and I have to rely on my fellow humans, and we're getting more and more fallible in the internet age as lies can spread much more quickly than they ever could before.
You've always seemed like somebody with a really critical eye. So like you're not gonna, you feel like somebody that if you're shown information that conflicts with your own understanding, you wouldn't have so much difficulty in like adjusting your view or your articulation around a matter. Like you give me that sense, just like looking at, like, I never get the sense from you that you're being contrarian for contrarian's sake. Like you're like you it comes from a place of actually trying to understand what the right position is.
Where's the line?
Yeah, like through your own kind of like appraisal. Like you don't seem like you like, I heard what you just said and I kind of relate to that because you only have the means available that you have, and that's people, but at the same time, evaluating things and being discerning. You seem like somebody that really thinks for herself.
Well, thank you. I can be persuaded by evidence. So I have been confronted with evidence on some things where I was very uncomfortable, and I was not comfortable being exposed to that evidence, but I did modify my positions on things. So it's not like I easily change my position. It's painful, but I will do it.
So what do you think are some things you changed your position on? Like, you said you started out interested in crystals, but were you always spiritual? And like, how did this happen? Those are maybe two different questions. But
yeah. Okay. So let's do the first one. Things that I've changed on.
Okay.
I mean, I'd say the main thing is I've become a lot less certain about a lot of things. I no longer knee-jerkly hate cops. When the defund the police thing happened, I saw a lot of different opinions, including the opinions of Black women who were saying this was a terrible idea to defund the police because the police are there. They need police to come when they are subject to domestic violence. And I also just thought, in general, like, there's a lot of criticisms I could have of the police, but not having police seemed like a bad idea. There was evidence that I was exposed to. So
we've seen some stuff, don't worry.
Yeah, I'm not anti-police anymore. It was like I used to be, all cops are, what is it? All cops are bastards, ACAB, or assigned cop at birth. It's like, no, I don't think that's true anymore.
But it was a really good punk rock show, and I agree with that feeling. But yeah, no, they're not black and white. We can't be black and white about everything all the time,
Right. I have a lot of things I used to have a strong opinion about, and then I realized that it's not like I flipped. It's just I realized that I lost my certainty about things. So gun issues.
Yeah.
That's very complicated in the US, and I don't have a great deal of confidence in.
I had a really good one of those. I was in France and someone was like, "Oh, you're American, so you think there should be guns?" I'm like, "That is the most absurd question I've ever been asked. There are guns. It's whether or not you have one. Do you? No? Well, that's all there is to it. It's a very confusing logic.
Yeah, I don't even know. Like, I don't like them. I don't like guns. I don't like war. Right? That's another.
Yeah.
I don't
agree on all these things. Yeah, let's drink.
I don't like borders, but you know what? At 56 years old, it's like, we gotta have these borders, and war is inevitable because human beings, there's limited resources and humans fight over them, and every country that exists came into existence via conquest, and that doesn't mean every country is illegitimate. It means, well, conquest is part of life. Also, vegetarianism, veganism. I'm still not a big meat eater, but I was much more of a animal rights person before, and just like eating meat was cruel. Like, it was cruel and it was morally wrong. But now it's like, well, humans are kind of omnivorous, and a lot of them are carnivorous, and we're animals, and death is a part of life, and even the good stuff, the good vegetarian stuff, has big environmental impact. There's just no way to be pure. And I don't fault people for eating meat anymore. It doesn't make the industry not cruel, but it's just a lot more complicated than meat bad, vegan good.
Right.
So you came to a place of absolutes, for sure. You had as a child, this is right, this is wrong, and we were really passionate about it, and maybe confused adults that you were that passionate about what was right and wrong. I can relate to that. Cool.
Yeah. I mean, but isn't that part of being
not everybody
young? No?
Only this. I mean, some of my favorite people, but not everybody. Yeah, no.
I want to speak to the defund the police thing, because that was such a weird hashtag. Because I remember when I first saw that, and I was like, defund the police, because that wasn't the issue. The issue was one of militarization. And so even just on a personal level, I had a thing happen in Santa Cruz in Midtown where somebody who was ex-military had got gunned down with automatic weapons directly behind my house against a fence, which they never said this on the news, but it's actually a Masonic center. They said it was a school, but it wasn't actually at the school parking lot. The school was was further away. But anyway, I had to grab my girlfriend to the floor. It was this really horrific thing. And then I watched I believe it was the Santa Cruz chief of police at a podium say, well, because that event happened with initially a domestic disturbance that the police showed up to, and he gunned down one of the cops there. He ran away, and then he got shot right behind our house. And I watched the chief of police say, if we had had the Bearcat at the time, this whole crisis could have been averted. And for those of you who don't know, the Bearcat is a military vehicle that the police got as a gift from I get from you know, from the government, which is just like, it's a crazy armored vehicle that they, you know, this tactical vehicle.
I remember.
And I was like, what were
they brought this and showed it off at the school, right? They're like, look, kids,
right,
this is what we got for the town.
totally. Yeah, and he made this statement. I was like, what would they have done? Would they have responded to the domestic disturbance with a military vehicle? What are they going to do? They're going to bust down the door over a domestic? It just made no sense to me. And I was like, how can he say that with a straight face? So I'm against the extreme militarization of the police force. Like, I don't want them to be just like the same level as like the National Guard with the training that they have. Like, it takes more training to be a barber than it does to be a police officer. And that's not like a knock. Like, it's hard to get people to want to, you know, to do that job in the first place. How are you going to determine, like, if you did like an emotional intelligence test, you wouldn't even have a police force hardly, because of all the people that would fail, or like, and you know, it's no fault of their own, but you got a lot of like veterans and like all the people who are attracted to being a police officer. It's like, what are their, you know, a lot of their credentials have to do with, you know, things that they did previously that could have been traumatizing. So I'm just saying that hashtag of defund the police made no sense to me when I first saw it. I was like, what? That's what we're asking for? That doesn't even make any sense. So anyway.
Yeah, again, with the all or nothing thing, which I think is part of the plan. Like, it feels like the idea is to wrestle the intellectual tug of war battle in front of everyone in a media publicity stunt, so that they don't have to be actually having that thought in their own heads, because you might come to a different conclusion if you're thinking for yourself. But if everyone's watching this tug of war and they see where the debate lands, and then that's where consensus lies. I mean, it's in between these two extremes.
Right.
Very Hegelian of you.
What did you say?
Hegelian. Very Hegelian.
Oh, Hegelian.
Hegelian dialectic.
Nerd. Okay, sorry, Nina. What you said?
Oh, it's political positions are more about signaling belonging to your tribe than the actual issues.
Right.
Like it was weird how things shook out with COVID vaccines, right? Like, first, for a few weeks, COVID vaccines were a Republican thing, but then they were a Democrat thing. Like, first they were right, then they were left. And then it was like really important to be into vaccines, not because of any benefit of the vaccines,
right,
but because your people would,
the principle,
they would attack you, they would shame you, they would give you a really hard time if you said anything critical of the vaccines. And I mean, COVID is a, you know, novel virus, devastating virus. I've been devastated by it. I've got an autoimmune disease now. I don't fault people for freaking out and having shutdowns and, you know, not knowing what was happening in the first year of COVID. I believed that the vaccines were effective, so I supported them, and gradually it became clear that they're not as effective as promised. I don't think that they're bad. I think they turned the novel virus into a non-novel virus, which is important. But I have really bad reactions to boosters. Like, they make me really, really sick. They give me 102-degree fevers, pain, and keep me in bed for 3 days and make me sick for 10 days. So after my third shot, I was like, I'm not getting any more of these shots. I'm getting too sick. And I described how they made me sick. And it's not anti-vax. It's just
no.
Me. But this was considered an affront to the dogma or something, you know, an affront. It was like blasphemy to to say that you get sick from the vaccines.
You're betraying the side that you're supposed to.
Yeah, it was like support. It was perceived as a betrayal, and someone said I was spreading dangerous misinformation, and I was like, I'm describing like what happened to me when I got my third shot.
Wow.
Did you not appreciate the free donuts? Are you just like turning your nose up in the air at those?
I didn't get any donuts. That would have changed everything.
Yeah, they only did that in the red states. This is the new one. Stop alarming Israel, or stop. Sorry, that's Freudian slip. Oh, I like that happened. Stop arming Israel. Opposing genocide is not anti-Semitic. Taxpayers for peace. What do you think? This is the new one. But haven't we always been at war with Oceania? What do we do with this?
Oh my God. Yeah. So the Israel thing,
let's solve it once and for all, right?
It just like my only issue, like the only people that I think are wrong about Israel-Palestine are people that think that they're right.
Yeah.
It's too complicated. Like it's if human beings, like the best minds in the world have been trying to solve the problems there. And they're not, because there's like this intractable situation. You have two nations with legitimate claim to the land, and it's a mess there, and the mess is not new. It's been a mess for a long time. And I only take offense at people that think they know, the people that see like clear right and wrong.
Right. It just feels like that's something that they change sides about. Like the media system is like all of a sudden telling everyone now this is what the party line is. And we had talked earlier about celebrities used to be the anti-vaxxers. Before COVID, it was very cool to not vax your kid. If you were a actress mom, you wouldn't do it. So it flipped that the left were pro-vaccine, although I guess it's what does it even mean anymore? Like it's not really like the side thing is not about, like you said, it's just a dogma party thing. So it's interesting to me to see this in LA of all places. There's in Hollywood they're saying like this Palestinian, I don't know, it's interesting how it's flipped so quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like, and you get to a point where you're just like, well, like I was saying, musical chairs or whatever. It's like, why are we politicizing virology in the first place? And now when it comes to like, we can't rely on what we used to when we'd be like, oh, this is the anti-war party and this is the pro-war party, because those rules don't apply anymore, because people will in roundabout ways come to rationalize whatever tribe it is that they're identified with. And it's like a series of check boxes. And if you don't check one of those boxes, you don't get to belong to that group anymore. And that's really alienating a lot of people from politics, at least in terms of Republican, Democrat. So I know where I stand on that. I'm RFK all the way, but
Well, okay, but like, so maybe then we get to like kind of part of the second question, which it sounds like you were pretty spiritual, like as a young person, or how would you rate yourself, or how did you become spiritual? Or
I was a hardcore atheist as a young person.
Okay.
I was really freaked out by religious people. I was freaked out by the word God. We didn't have that.
Well, that's traditional
in our house, except when we observed Passover, right? When we observed Passover, we had these Haggadahs, and my father, the atheist, would be saying blah 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 God, and because I grew up with it since even before I could speak.
You're like, what the heck?
I wasn't shocked by it, but as I got older, I was like, what is this?
Right.
So obviously I made a movie about that. I started having what I can only call spiritual experiences starting when I was about 17. I was interested in religion. I was scared of religion, but I really liked like my intro religious studies course in college. I grew up in a college town. There were a lot of South Asian and East Asian professors.
Cool.
I went to school with a lot of their kids, so I was aware that Christianity wasn't the only thing. And of course, my family was Jewish, but there weren't a lot of Jews in Urbana, Champaign. There were some. Mostly, what I actually thought Jewish meant that you don't believe in God.
Wow, yeah. Wow.
because we didn't, and we were Jewish.
There's a new movie in that sentence.
My parents didn't use the word atheist. They said, like, okay, in December, they're like, you don't have to do the Christmas project at school. Just tell your teacher you're Jewish. They didn't say tell the teacher you're atheist.
Well, there's different types of atheists, right? There's atheists that will assert there is no God, like the Richard Dawkins atheism, which can come across as fanatical as
the evangelist,
any religious
fundamentalist atheist. Yeah.
But then there's the atheists, which I imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, you might ascribe to the form of maybe when you were younger, maybe not, where you kind of just like you're like, I don't know. I don't, or like it's the problem of defining something. Like, what does God mean? Like, do you not believe in energy? Like, what is it that we don't believe in exactly? Like, what is God?
Well, I call that agnostic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Were you agnostic or atheist?
Well, when my mom was explaining this to me, so I finally, I remember saying to my mom, we don't believe in God because we're Jewish. And my mom said, oh, well, that's not exactly what Jewish means. And she explained stuff to me, and she explained that she is agnostic and my father's atheist. But, mostly for me, it was just like, we don't do that. Like, we do not, because I was, mostly there were Christians in Urbana-Champaign. In fact, when I was growing up, it was a huge Christian center. There were tons of Christian camps. There's tons of churches there, big born again movements happening there. So I did know a lot of kids who prayed and talked about God and stuff like that, and they freaked me out. It was like pod people. It was like, why would you surrender your mind to this parasite? Not that I had the words for it, but they scared me. But yeah, when I was 17, I started having some weird experiences, and and I also read the book The Doors of Perception. So I was just interested in like weird psychedelic stuff, even though I didn't use psychedelics, and my brain was that's the model we like. There's discussion now about like what the brain chemistry model means, whether it's a valid model, but I would have said that I had some weird brain chemistry.
Neurodivergent is the new hashtag. We're all using it. It's cool.
Oh my God. That was mescaline that Huxley was talking about in that book. And mescaline, I'll tell you what, you don't get much purer as a psychedelic than that. I don't know. I guess these days I'm allowed to talk freely about this, especially because I'm in Santa Cruz where that's, legal. We got mushrooms are legal.
Oh, mescaline's legal in Santa Cruz?
Yeah, there was something that happened out of it with the Native American church after it was made legal, where they kind of combated that. And I'm not exactly sure where like San Pedro is at this point, but I think peyote is another matter because they use that in their ceremonies. But
you're still not supposed to drive.
Yeah, but anyway, I mean, that's one of the better psychedelics out there. I'd say actually mescaline from San Pedro is more similar to LSD 25 than what most people call LSD today, because it's all the research chemical versions of the thing. Whereas like mescaline is the experience of mescaline is very similar to true like Sandoz Labs LSD,
But you felt just neurodivergent in a sense. You felt like you were already, you're thinking these thoughts. You're able to think these thoughts on your own at the time.
Yeah, and also I was subject to horrific depressive episodes, terrifying ones. So I still have not used mescaline. I still have not taken LSD. I would like to participate in one of those therapy experiments where you take, regulated, tested stuff with a qualified therapist. I'd be interested in that.
We were going to say, look under your chair, Nina.
Yeah, and you know what else? You could have fooled us with your artwork, because some of your artwork is very psychedelic, I gotta say.
Yeah, that's what people always told me. Like the way I talked back then, they were like, "What? You don't use that stuff?" And it's like, "No, I don't need to." But yeah, I've always been interested in it, and I've only gotten more interested in religion. I am no longer freaked out by it. I think it's something human beings, I think religion is like a cultural symbiote with humans. There's a lot of cultural symbiotes. It's a living thing. And ones that have been around for a long time have evolved and become less toxic. I'm concerned about brand new religions. I think when they're new, like new viruses, they can be more intense and fatal, and they have to be around for a while to
They won't call it a religion most of the time. When new religions start, they call it whatever they call it, and then like over time people are like, wait a minute, this really seems like a religion here. Being born in the wrong body is a very religious concept.
Also, then if you think it's like because civilization's like this hermit shell we're wearing, right? So like, what is religion then in terms of evolutionarily? It can speed things up. I mean, if you have isn't Scientology and these new religions speeding things up because they're taking contemporary ideas and they're applying the ancient methods of interpretation, trying to figure out what we can do to move forward, not just in our own lifetime, but in multiple generations. Why do you think it needs to be something ancient, or why is it better if it's enduring?
Well, so new religions, if religion is new, every member of it is a zealot. Every member is a fanatic. And they do a lot of splitting. And there a lot of like exorcisms and a lot of attacking, a lot of like fear of infidels and apostates and things like that. They're much more agitated. Like if you think about Christians in America, there are deep believers, but they're very mellow compared to members of new religions. And some of the new religion that I'm talking about, can you guess what I'm talking about when I'm talking about new religion? I'm not talking about Scientology.
Right.
Totally.
Although some Scientologists may ascribe to said new religion while also being Scientologists.
Sure. And there's
we're talking about Mormons right now, right?
No. And a lot of professed atheists are
part of that
extremely religious. And that was notable to me. Like, is there some kind of protection that older religions confer on people that protects them from new religions? I wrote a blog about this a couple of years ago, about fungi, like about penicillin, right? Penicillin is a mold. Mold is bad. But penicillin will actually protect you from far worse molds. And that's how I think of a lot of time-tested religions. They're like penicillin. It's like, you don't want your bread to have these green lumps of penicillin on it, right? Your dream is pure bread, and that's the atheist dream. It's like no mold at all. Mold is gross. Let's get it off of our mind bread. But when you do that, something much worse than penicillin is going to come and colonize that.
So something came up on our show on Andreas's other show yesterday, where we were talking about the Hebrew word Oz, and it was being pointed out that that Oz is strength, but it's also a she-goat in Hebrew. And so I wanted to express this to you for a long time, Nina, because like I watched Seder-Masochism. The first time I watched it, I was like, does she realize how esoterically significant it is for her to portray herself as the she-goat talking to like the all-seeing eye of your father? Like the symbolism in that is actually very deep.
Azazel and the goat and all this.
Yeah, there's a whole gematria thing too, because like the Greek gematria for Pan is 77. The Hebrew gematria for she-goat and as Oz and strength is also 77. And so, Pan is related to as kind of this goat, so it's goat god. So it's just it's interesting to me that there's that correspondence. But yeah, no, I pulled like esoteric meaning out of Seder-Masochism the times that I've watched it. Like it's like with every viewing you can kind of go deeper into that. And I don't know how much of that was even intended by you. It's just the nature of what you're doing is just like extremely like synchronistic and kind of psychedelic. And the thing is like how many films are out there where somebody is having such a personal exploration of their religion and trying to understand it in like in ways that actually make sense for you personally. And it's true for Sita Sings the Blues too. Like I used to study under Baba Hari Das for about 7 years. I traveled to India with him, and they do the Ramayana at Mount Madonna every year. The kids would, and so I grew up watching these performances of the Ramayana, and then I come to watch Sita Sings the Blues after I'd seen Seder-Masochism. And like for me, like, and then I studied with an elderly rabbi for over 10 years, transcribing Zohar. And so like, it's almost like your work feels like so personal to me, but you're sharing something that's so personal to you that it's really, it just shows the, or at least I don't know how universal it would apply to everybody who watches these things, but I know for myself, it hit me in a deep personal way. So, you know,
I have to ask you. Okay, so this word Oz, how would you spell it in English?
In English, OZ, I suppose.
Oh, so like Frank Oz is
Wizard of
Oz. Okay.
Yeah, so it would be Ayin Zion in Hebrew, but yeah,
like a picture of
because Ayin is 70 and Zion is 7. So yeah.
I don't know what Ayin. I don't know any Hebrew, but I'll look that up. So that's really cool. I had no idea. So you said it means both truth and she-goat?
It means strength.
Oh, strength.
And she-goat. And actually, if you look at the two pillars of the Kabbalistic tree and the two pillars of Solomon's temple, they're referred to as Yakin and Boaz, respectively.
Oh, Boaz, yeah.
So Boaz is in strength. So the bow part is just in, right? And then the Oz is strength. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So it might be spelled AZ, not OZ.
I usually say Aleph is usually A, but it's not like Ayin is you know, I mean it's just phonetic. It's like how do you sound these out? That's why when you read books where they're writing things out in English from Hebrew, it's kind of like you're allowed to take certain liberties, you know, because who's the judge of it?
I'd like to buy a vowel.
Right. Well, that's really cool. No, I did not know that, but I know it now, and that's going right into my goat file because I'm really interested in goats and the symbolism.
Yeah, so that was the real question, I think, at the beginning of like, I did the same thing. That's all right, but like, what is the deal with the goat? Why do you care about the goat? What led you to use the goat in your own movie as yourself?
Oh, the goat in Seder-Masochism? Yeah. Well, for one thing, all over the Book of Exodus and elsewhere in the Old Testament, there's all this stuff about, you know, you make a sweet savor unto the Lord. There's tons of stuff about animal sacrifice. And, you know, you sacrifice a goat, a kid. I am his kid, but I'm also communicating with him. Like I did this interview with my father and then he died, which was expected. And I depicted him as God. So I'm like trying to reach my father. And this is how humans reach.
It's already made out of money. I mean,
this is how. Well, not completely, but you could. There's that money thing is explained in the movie in that one scene. So that's like the medium, right? The medium of communication between human and Yahweh is burnt offerings of goats. That's one reason. Another is that in my family, I was the scapegoat and the black sheep. So, and sheep and goats, they're almost equivalent.
Especially a black sheep, I feel like.
What?
Especially a black sheep.
Yeah. And, you know, it's like charred, right? Like I just did this black thing. So, and I'm a scapegoat. So all of that had to do with being the goat. But, you know, it's like a sacrificial goat, goat, scapegoat. And I'm so interested in goats, particularly because of the whole scapegoat experience. I've been for the last 8 years trying to make sense of my scapegoat experience, and I know other people are having this experience as well, but it's such a primal human experience, and it's such a big experience when it happens, and I just keep returning to the goats. Also, you know, Baphomet is a goat. So it's like the other side of the scapegoat. It's like people hunger for scapegoats, like and for the sacrifice, like they want that victim or that blood, and then switch it around to Baphomet, which is often depicted as a goat. Although really Baphomet is supposed to be a symbol of balance, but as understood in our culture, it's a scary symbol of like the scary goat, right? Like the goat that isn't the sacrifice, the goat that you make a sacrifice to instead.
Right.
Like that goat's going to drink your blood.
Well, there's the two goats in the scapegoat ritual traditionally. There's the one that's sacrificed to Hashem, and then there's the goat that's released into the wilderness, and that goat is the one that's actually handed over to the klipot. So to the klipot, the outside influences that kind of like enshroud the shefa. So there's like the idea is that there's this kind of the essence, the spiritual essence that moves through us, and then there's everything that's alien to that kind of like constricts that over time. So it's something that comes with the fall, as they say. The klipot have more and more strain on that emanated flow until it reaches a certain breaking point, and basically the levee breaks, and all the energy gets back. We go back to what we were in a new form. Is kind of the prophecy there. That's
like ejecting the goat. That's like.
Right, but in the Bible, there's a kind of a weird, like, most of the time they translate it as like for, but it's not for, it's as. So like the goat isn't like for God, it's standing in as God, or as the evil. Like it's going through the process on behalf of, right? So it seems interesting for you because you're like, wow, this sucks sometimes to be a scapegoat. I don't know if you're like the older sibling or something like that.
Youngest. I'm the youngest.
I think it could be even worse, actually, I think, because they keep you safe. But then they're thinking, okay, it's cool because I'm processing karma for other people. Maybe that's like a gift. Maybe that's something I can do.
Right.
Like something to think about, right?
Well, in this case, as far as the goat that gets released into the wilderness is kind of likened to this kind of Kabbalistic interpretation of the book of Job, where what was Job's faults, because he was so perfect, that became his fault, that he gave nothing back to the klipot. So there was all the sacrifices were to Hashem, none of it went to the outside ones. And in that became its own kind of fallibility. And so it's saying, like, don't try to be too perfect is actually the lesson there of Job. Or one of the lessons, I guess.
Interesting. So I started doing a project about Jesus Christ, the story of Jesus. I've recorded interviews with random people telling me the story of Jesus. No cheating. Great. They're not allowed to look at the Bible. And initially I thought like, the story of Jesus, it's a scapegoat story, right? Because a bunch of people, nailed him to a cross. Mm-hmm. But it was pretty clear to me after several interviews that he is not perceived as a scapegoat. He is perceived, understandably, as a sacrificial lamb. And there's a difference between a sacrificial lamb and a scapegoat, even though they're both sacrifices of a sort.
You gotta be careful, though. See, like earlier we were talking, I think we both stood in the same ground and talking about like the pod people, because there's like a kind of Christian that is in the Revelation, it talks about goats that say that they're dancing and praying in the Lord's name. And then they say, the shepherd says, leave my sight, for you're not my flock, essentially. And he comes on these sheep who didn't know.
That's not in Revelation, is it?
Yeah, right.
Where is that?
I don't think that's in Revelation. I mean, I illustrated all of Revelation, and if there had been goats in there, I would have.
Oh, I wanted to bring that up to you, Nina, actually, because I was going to ask you if the apocalyptic tweets is your like another account that you have.
Oh yeah, apocalypseanimated.com.
Okay,
the whole
so I was
thing.
Like, it was so funny because I was like, for a while there, I was like, because I know that you made your art open source, so I was like, is this just other people using your open source art, or no, that is you could make a movie just out of all of those little clips, just step by step going in order through the book of Revelation. How many verses have you done now? My God.
So
that project's done. There's almost 300 animated GIFs, and the idea behind that was to do a illuminated manuscript, because there's a lot of illuminated manuscript books of Revelation, and I was just doing it as a website with the GIFs. So that project is done. It's one of my favorite things that I've made. It's very obscure, didn't take off.
Who else has animated the Book of Revelation? I don't know. It's like verse by verse.
Pretty much.
Yeah. But anyway, I don't think there were any goats in there, because
No,
if there were,
It's Matthew 25. It's a big.
Yes, you're talking about sheep go to heaven, goats go to hell.
God, you're
yes.
a too. That's great. That's good.
Yeah, the parable of the sheep and the goats, and I have an interpretation of that, which is hard to explain to people, but
we'll do it. I think you'll fit in right here.
Okay, all right. So it's like, what the hell did Jesus have against goats? When I first read that, I was like, what is his problem with goats?
Just those goats, right?
And it just seemed mean. It's just like, just total bias. However, with the scapegoats, like you said, there's two goats. There's the scapegoat and there's the sacrificial goat, and they're twins.
Yeah.
And then Jesus was the sacrificial lamb, which basically is the sacrificial goat, but specifically, they call him a lamb, maybe so that that he's sacrificial. So I think that parable of the sheep and the goats is, if your life becomes a sacrifice, if what is most precious to you is taken away, and by other people because they need they're hungry for blood or whatever, you can experience that as a scapegoat and it will be hell, or you can experience it as your life is a sacrifice to God and it will be heaven.
Oh yeah, that reminds me of is it Marcus Aurelius, it's actually in Jacob's Ladder, when he says, if you're frightened of dying and you're holding on, you'll see devils tearing your life away. But if you've made your peace, then the devils are really angels freeing you from the earth. So it's just a matter of how you look at it. It's interesting too that the Jewish people in Judea, like, we don't know much about who these people really were, but we know that they were very stubborn and likened to goats. And we can see that in the writings of Josephus Flavius. And so it was kind of this take on what were, because, it was 100-year occupation and they resisted the whole time. And so when the Romans would go to conquer someplace, they'd get them to eventually worship Vespasian Caesar as God and Titus Caesar as the son of God. And kind of, they would even change the architecture, the setup of like the 36 square mile grids that they put everywhere that they would conquer. And they never did that with Jerusalem. And to this day, Jerusalem still has the structure that it's had for so long, even after Jerusalem was sacked by the Romans. And so I find that really interesting, this idea of the Jewish people as being likened to goats because of their resisting nature. But you're right that it gets interesting too, especially if you look at anthropology and like the golden bough and the way that the scapegoat, what that used to mean in ancient kingdoms was that you'd ritualistically kill the king, and his challenger would take his place and marry the king's daughter, and it was a way to kind of ensure, or at least to kind of subvert the kingdom, but one person's power becoming too much, because they knew that would lead to corruption. And so as a way to kind of like trim back the tree, so to speak. But then Jesus is the innocent goat. Like the idea of the innocent scapegoat is not really one that corresponds to those older anthropological ideas. And so it's like this person was so innocent, and that's kind of the whole point of Christianity, is that he was killed in being completely innocent. And so that's where the lamb, as you say, comes in, where it's not really a goat anymore.
But the scapegoat ritual,
yes,
the thing is that you take two goats and the priest draws lots, so any sin carried by the scapegoat did not originate with the scapegoat.
No, and sin is collective in Judaism.
It's the sins are placed. They're a projection. Right?
Yeah, there's no personal salvation in Judaism traditionally. That's a Christian concept, because we all share in the sins of missing the marks of everyone else. If your neighbor misses the mark, you're affected by that too. The whole community is. And so we all kind of share in this kind of collective sin. And that's kind of, that's where Judeo-Christianity and Judaism really like kind of conflict in that way. And I'm of the personal opinion, just having transcribed a stack of ancient texts relating to the scapegoat with my rabbi years ago, where we kept on coming across humor. Like every so often we come across humor anyway, but this was like really pronounced, to the point that it really felt like all these people writing on the scapegoat ritual didn't take it seriously. And so for me, I kind of feel like they took the prophecy from the book of Isaiah around the Mashiach, and they combined that with this scapegoat ritual to form Christianity.
King Josiah and the Deuteronomists were really against the scapegoat ritual, and they tried to write out the atonement. They weren't a big fan. So if you read like hold on, was it? It's 2 Kings 23. He talks about how he like destroys all the temples of all of the the other Jewish people, and it's like good guy King Josiah. Like he got rid of all of these like Baal temples and got rid of all these like female priesthoods. But really, what he was he went to different parts of the 12 kingdoms of Judea, and he said, "You guys have to come to our temple from now on." And he killed the priests and the women priestesses, burned their bodies on the altars, and scattered the powder of them of their graves as like common people. So like just they would never go again back to your old temples, and like just shattered old Judea. And really, like if it weren't for the fact that the first temple was destroyed and they ended up still like some Jews continued to believe in these traditions, then we probably wouldn't even have the scapegoat tradition, it sounds like.
Well, my other theory of the scapegoat tradition is, in the story of the binding of Isaac.
Yes.
Right.
So that's interpreted as the shift from human sacrifice to animal sacrifice. That and this is progress, right? Like you can be redeemed by a sheep or a goat, redeemed by a ram, I guess. Instead of a human being. So these animals became stand-ins for human sacrifices. And that's what I think the scapegoat is too. And I think that the impulse to use humans as scapegoats, like I think what tribes would do is they would find somebody, because this is my experience of life, right? Like groups of people find scapegoats. That is the way people bond. That is the way people they get very excited when they have a scapegoat. Not just an enemy, but ejecting someone from their own tribe is very exciting and gives a huge amount of energy to everybody else in the tribe.
Do you think got a lot of ratings with Survivor?
What?
Got a lot of ratings with Survivor.
Ratings?
Oh. They got a lot of ratings, like you're saying, like people, because what was the appeal of Survivor was what you're describing, was people were like, oh, who's out next, and kind of getting off on that,
Yeah.
Even Trump's show, The Apprentice, was the same concept. You're fired, like people,
So anyway, this is a aspect of human nature, just sort of like cannibalism. And the innovation was, we're going to use a goat for that. Like the members of our tribe, we don't have enough tribe members to have the tribe go after them like this, to eject them like this. We're going to use an animal instead.
Right.
Do you think we could keep evolving and have digital scapegoats at some point, or does that invalidate the concept of a scapegoat?
I think an NFT is a good idea.
Or like if you had a convincing AI personality that no one necessarily knew was AI, we could put all of our sins on that and take it down and have them canceled publicly and sort of like, but it would just be, do you think that if people knew it was digital, like that would still be able to serve the purpose? Could that be like the next evolution in making it more and more lax? Like what if we start running on animals?
That sounds extremely dangerous, Thomas.
More dangerous than killing off the rest of the goats?
Well, once you start, like, it's what's coming up for me is I'm thinking of this kind of like sci-fi idea where we have the dictator who's digital and we can all rant and rave and say whatever we want to, but he's just a hologram,
Now that you're after water, I'm really curious what she was going to say to that.
Sorry, about what? Like AI scapegoats?
Yeah,
or just a digital scapegoat. But I guess AI would be a good version.
That's sort of what was in 1984, right? Like they had the enemy, the artificial enemy. I don't remember what the enemy's name was. There was Big Brother, who was Oceania's leader, and then there was
the bad guy, but then there's Goldstein, I think, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah,
he's kind of a good guy. Good guy Goldstein is way. He's a mensch. I like him.
Yeah. So I'm sure that would work for big ones, but also in 1984, people turned on each other all the time. And that's the thing about these, my understanding is lots of regimes that had charismatic leaders and official scapegoats also had the populace turning on each other and informing on each other all the time. So I think you could have AI scapegoats, but I just think people just love, I mean, it's very difficult for human beings to get along in civilization. We're pushed together. We have lots of interactions with each other. We bug each other, and it's easy. It's efficient for leaders to get the populace to police each other.
Right.
I don't think that would go away. And I just think the natural inclination of groups to scapegoat people would make that keep happening. I mean, my family scapegoated me, right? They didn't only scapegoat me. They also kept me alive and loved me to a large extent. But there's some, psychological things going in the whole family system. And I did serve as a kind of trash can for their shadows. And I just think that is something so, it has to be something so primal. And I think it's something human beings can't help but do.
Nina, I got to get your deck of cards because we're talking about the scapegoat thing. And you basically made a deck of cards of scapegoats in your is it culture wars, gender wars?
Gender wars. There's the gender wars cards. Here, hang on a second. Let me pull some cards out.
Yeah, do that. That's cool.
Who's winning the gender wars, anyways?
Me.
Andreas is.
I think Thomas is doing all right. He's got a better beard.
Yeah, first I want to show you some of the Apocalypse animated cards.
Oh, let's get you a solo.
Ooh, lenticular.
Wow. What? They're holograms.
Wait a minute. Is that one not working right? Hang on, I get the other set. Hold on.
It works if you move it to the.
I'll be right back.
Okay.
Oh, now I'm jealous. Now I want some lenticulars.
We need to now. All right, everybody, we're gonna picture on the Mormon second part of her Jesus. we're gonna turn it around. Don't tell her. Okay, we can sell her on this.
Just nonstop comments about Nina. Please make a Mormon animation.
You're not doing it right if you don't. What are you? Because whose version are you telling? You tell the Catholic version where they killed the guy. You're telling. I know this is what he wanted. Trust us. He wanted you to drink his blood. He said so himself.
All right. Here's the real thing. This is the Apocalypse animated card set.
That's awesome.
There's 10 cards in here. And this is the coolest merch I've ever made.
This is so great. What?
I've made a lot of merch.
Okay, I have new standards, new benchmark goals.
This is my best merch. Whoops.
Okay, I'm gonna have to get a set.
There we go. Yeah, they're galloping better than that.
Oh, the Four Horsemen. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
This is just an expression, but shut up and take my money. But you seriously.
All right.
I'll buy
Store.ninapaley.com.
All right, I'm
That's the locust. Oh,
these are so good.
That's the Woman of the Apocalypse and the Red Dragon.
Oh yeah.
And they all have stuff on the back.
Wow.
Your Guide to the Apocalypse. That is the CD.
Wow. It's one of my favorites now, I think. Whoa.
That's the number of the beast.
But only the wise will know it. So there's that.
This is the temple. Smoke coming from the temple.
Dang, that's fun.
With the vials. Guess what that is?
It looks vaginal.
Yeah, am I going OBGYN on this?
Oh, is it the Scarlet Woman or something? Because
it's got the Whore of Babylon.
Yeah, there you go.
And that is the River of Life and the Tree of Life. Ooh.
Is that not the tunnel in Willy Wonka?
That
I love tunnel in Ukraine, actually. So.
Right.
That's pretty great. Those are awesome.
So
do you have the gender war cards with you too?
And then I have a pack of gender wars cards.
Oh man,
apparently...
every bar should buy these for the table. Every table should have the gender word cards just set up at every bar.
Yeah, and I was doing 2 for 1 sale, and I should do that again because I have a lot of these cards.
seasonal.
and I need to move.
You could
them
put
to
a
there.
SYNCTANK coupon code if they saw the show.
Oh,
221.
okay, right.
I
That's a good idea. If
don't
I
know if it's a good idea, but it's a very
go
YouTube
in
idea.
there, but yeah. So half of the cards are like the red suits. There's J.K. Rowling.
Oh my god.
Ooh, I like my J.K. Rowling
Dude,
card.
AstroTurf, right?
Yeah, she's the queen, right? Queen with a K.
Based.
But yeah, the red ones are all the gender critical ones, and then the black ones are the queer theory.
Man, you're gonna get Andy Warhol, aren't you? We gotta get you a bulletproof vest. These are kind of controversial, like even for your audience. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean so I did these last year, and I've continued to make art despite everything that has happened to me. But last year, right, I was doing a comic book and I crowdfunded it on Indiegogo, and then Indiegogo canceled it.
No.
After I reached my goal, right? So I reached and exceeded my
Indiegogo
goal, and I was just
evil and
waiting.
woke. Oh my god.
Waiting for the money, and
note to self: I never trusted them, and I'm never using them.
Oh my god. Yeah, so that happened, and then I was just like, all right, I'm just gonna go whole hog, right? Like no matter what I do, I'm demonized. So fine, I'll do like really turfy stuff now.
I think that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation actually had ties to Indiegogo, or at least one of those or more of the crowdfunding
check out
websites.
DonorBox is actually legit, and they won't do that to you.
Well, I crowdfunded the Apocalypse animated cards on Give Send Go, which is a Christian.
Yeah, Christians are a lot of things, but not very woke yet. They're still working on it. But.
Yeah, I mean there are some, but Give Send Go isn't. They said that they wouldn't cancel me, and I'm like, all right, I just want a platform that won't cancel me. They called me up to pray for my project.
That's super. Okay. Are they Mormon? This sounds cool. I don't know.
Is that extra? How much is the prayer service?
Yeah,
it was not. I got free prayers,
dude.
It was after.
What's it called? Prayer Send Go.
Give Send Go.
Give Send Go is my new platform. I'm gonna try that out.
They have somebody that
sounds like my cup of not tea, because of Mormons. But help and hope go hand in hand. This is great. Okay. So these guys help you finance. Which one was it, for the card game or for
the Apocalypse animated cards?
Apocalypse animated.
I figured, it's Christian theme.
Yeah, they're in. For sure.
Why not? I'm just like out of the blue. She's like, "Hello." You could tell that like she was just going down a list of names and phone numbers, and she said, "Oh, I am here to pray for your project."
Oh, I'm so in. This is my new team.
Would you like to pray? And I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll pray." And she.
Did you record it? From now on, that's what we need to do. That
no.
Like a YouTube video in and of itself.
No.
I know this is the thing with Jesus, though, because Jesus is legit in a lot of ways. Legitimate. I'm not going to say that word ever again. I'm sorry, but the idea that the blood sacrifice, magic atonement, where you murder the shepherd or the scapegoat or the lamb. I mean, it seems like you murder a lamb, it's one thing, but you murder the shepherd, and he's immortal because he's God now. So it's this blood sacrifice of God that's omnipotent, omnipresent. That's supposed to it's a space-time blood sacrifice ritual. That's both awesome but terrifying. That's it seems kind of more evil and satanic than it does seem like what Christianity is supposed to be. In terms of what I think Christianity should mean, like etymologically, it should be like what Jesus was doing. And so, what was his deal? His teaching, first off, that God wasn't this angry, jealous, wrathful God that murders people with plagues all the time. Not all the time.
All the time. And sometimes he kills his son.
Just the weekdays. He kicks back on the weekends.
If you don't know to put goat blood over your door, your parents weren't raising you right. That's what I've decided. So, I mean, but Jesus is saying, or Yeshua is saying, not that I need to die to take your debt, but there should be a jubilee, right? Isn't that kind of the idea? The Jews were all about, there needs to be a jubilee. We need to get to a point where it's just washed, right? And then they're using Jesus's death as that wash, but that wasn't, it was his life, I think, is kind of, that was supposed to teach us how we're supposed to wash each other. What do you think? Or is it just literally a blood sacrifice?
Well, lately I have been thinking about how psychically cannibalistic humans are.
True.
And this whole thing about like this, drink my blood, eat my body. It always seemed gross, right? Like, ugh, why would people do that? But it is once again speaking to human nature. Like humans want to eat each other. Humans want blood. And
Let's
so
go back to some of those Catholic churches from the 15th century, Steve. Steve doesn't exist.
Cool. Yeah, so it's like, here you go. I know you want blood. It's human nature. Humans are so vicious.
Yeah. Nina, like Seder-Masochism has this kind of master thesis idea behind it, which is also, like I say, like very synchronistic. But when you're relating to like that, there's like the roots of the thing are kind of ultimately unknown because history is written by the winners. Like we ultimately have little to go on. Like right now, even as we're able to record so much, we still debate constantly on what actually happened. You're like, well, what really happened?
It helps that their bone, the losers or bones are what they wrote their history on.
Right. So I guess you have this kind of idea of like this kind of goddess religion that was kind of just rejected, or something else was put in its place. So they took aspects of it and integrated it into this kind of other system. I might be not articulating this as well as you do in your film, but that's an idea that I've seen like really strong arguments for elsewhere. I did an interview with somebody on an old podcast that I had called Always Record, where we talked to somebody who wrote a book called The Venus Blueprint, where he was making this argument that there's evidence for a very feminine religion that was pretty much wiped off the face of the earth for the most part, but there's remnants that you'll see in other religions and even certain ancient temples where you see these kind of reoccurring symbols of like the pentagram and the rose and even the two pillars, and that this is something that was like a woman's like a very feminine religion that was basically like women were the priests of, and this kind of idea. And I feel like Seder-Masochism really makes a point of that what we see now isn't what it was, and like we don't really know what it was. Am I getting this right?
Yeah, we don't know what it was. I had to find some way to finish the movie and some way to relate to the story, and I was not relating to it through Moses. Moses as the hero just wasn't working for me. So I had a pile of books interpreting Exodus, and the interpretation that I liked the most was Merlin Stone's in When God Was a Woman. And that was, she said that like monotheism, you can only have one God, and it's a male God, and that's how you get rid of it's not just other gods, but it's goddesses.
Yeah.
So that was, I sort of took her thesis and ran with it, largely because it was the only way in I could find. I was not moved by Exodus the way I was moved by the Ramayana. It was a very different sort of experience. So, and I did, when it was like, all right, I'm going to have to show the goddess. How am I going to do that? And it's like, well, I'm just going to make her up like everybody else because we don't have a connection to this stuff.
Did you read Freud's Moses of Sarsif connection book?
I didn't. So I should have.
That's my like way I handle it. Exodus, really. Like Moses is at the same time within 100 years of Akhenaten. They either are really closely connected, or if the Torah is to be believed, probably the same person, because he's floated down a river. Moses is like, this is interesting too from the plague perspective, because tell a little girl that like God's going to kill all the firstborns, but remind her that Moses was one of the firstborn that was going to be killed the first time around when the Egyptians were just doing that kind of blanketedly. So this baby's floated down, becomes essentially an Egyptian prince, learns how to speak Egyptian. This might be a better excuse than missing their tongue. is that they don't speak Hebrew very well. They speak Egyptian very well. And, you know, so this idea that Akhenaten or Osarseph, the priesthood of Akhenaten, what does Akhenaten do? He introduces Atenism, the son of God, this one thing that you're supposed to worship from now on is the sun. You're supposed to ignore the other gods. We're supposed to shut down these other temples. We're going to move to a new city, Amarna, right? And so there's this, like, we're lost for 40 years in the desert, is the Josephus kind of metaphor, that we're in Amarna, which is destroyed at the end of its generation, and then they move on back to where they came from, because Yuya, 200 years earlier, Yuya is Joseph. Joseph comes to Egypt at the same time as 200 years before Akhenaten, is this Semitic prince who is a slave, who ends up during a drought making Egypt the most powerful nation in Africa at that time. Which is like the closest thing we have to like a historical Joseph, right? Is like Yuya. So it ties really well together to me. It seems like pretty reasonable. But then it's interesting because you do have these, like, you have a Semitic demon narrative, because you have Yahweh as this sort of, he's all about destruction, connected to plagues and everything else like that. And his wife is Asherah. And Asherah is really important in the choir of gods, because they're not saying there's only one God. They're saying you're only supposed to worship one God. There's like the source of gods, right. But they're really like, God would be really a weirdly angry, jealous God, right? Like they write, if he's telling you to worry about other gods that don't exist. He's got to be saying that because he thinks that they do.
There's a problem here, because we're starting with we're accepting the translation of Yud-He Vav-He as being a purely masculine expression, when we know that even inherent in the letters that you have, a male, a female, a male, a female, a father, a mother, a son, and a daughter. And so as far as I can tell, Tetragrammaton is nature. And if something happens where you have a cataclysmic event from nature, they're like, wow, look at this vengeful God, but at nowhere do I see a justification. Maybe somebody can enlighten me, but from just having transcribed portions of the Torah, I don't see where the argument for this being a strictly masculine figure is anywhere justified. Yet, because it's been repeated so much by preachers and by everything else, for so long people were illiterate too, and they were just relying on what preachers told them that this text said. Many of those preachers didn't even really know the text. They're just regurgitating whatever it was that they were told. And so we have this giant, like, there's like a residue of this momentum of just like, for how long people were told what this said without actually reading it. I can't
really justify it. I can only say I know when it started, because you look at Elohim, which means plural gods. And we mentioned the Deuteronomists right after Josiah that started to like really destroy the temples to Asherah, to the wife of God, to the family of God, right? And this idea that God was no longer a plural Elohim, the plural of gods, like those above, that now all of a sudden it's this father figure specifically.
Right. But isn't this interesting in terms of like what's happening today? Like we're looking at the gender wars deck and we're having these all of this. There really is like a gender war going on, which to me just appears to be like people coming up against a duality that's being projected on that polarity that exists in nature. And so like when you're looking at Bereshit and you have, God created man in God's own image, but it's not man, it's male and female created. That translation is so poor, because you're literally they're describing that whatever this template is that is both male and female was created in the image of this kind of like this template that exists in a higher realm that's being basically in emanation being made into this dense form. And so it's strange, because it's this acknowledgement of this underlying polarity in nature, and then what do? We're relating to what we see ourselves as and projecting that back onto God, if that makes sense. Like if God created us in God's own image, and then we create God in the image that we see ourselves in, which may or may not be ourselves. In fact, I would say it's a pretty strong argument that it isn't. Do we perceive ourselves as we ultimately are? And then where do we go from there? Does this make sense?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's like, it's all it's all fascinating and fun to think about. But when I was making the movie, I needed a way in that was like personal. It's like, it can't just, for me, it can't just be like, oh, cool. I needed a way in. And when you make a movie, like you need something sort of resembling a protagonist.
Right.
And it's always Moses with this story. Like, it's got to be Moses. There's the 10 Commandments. There's Prince of Egypt.
Moses' sister is very important, right?
Well, that's what people say.
Mormons
but if you read the actual text, she's mentioned like once or twice.
Because it's been cut out. All the good stuff gets cut down in the big version. Yeah.
Well, that's what we got. We got it where she's. I mean, and so she's kind of
where they mention
made
her.
Up also,
where they mention her, though, they do say that she has the same powers as the priesthood of Melchizedek and Aaron. So, like, she's got the power of the endowment of power, which is not what they. So, if they by mentioning that, it's important because it's stating that God, or in their understanding of reality, women have the capacity for the same power that they often are refused after this point.
Is this in Exodus where they say this, or is it somewhere else?
I'll have to find
it's somewhere else. I don't think it's in Exodus itself. Again, there's commentaries.
Yeah,
that
and there's the Gomorrah, and there's all these other sources.
But Exodus itself, she's like barely mentioned at all.
Right, but you know what?
Right.
Andreas does make a point that maybe, I don't know how much it applies to this, but there is something to be said for who gets the most screen time isn't necessarily the ultimate indicator of their significance.
Sure. I mean, and there's lots we can do to interpret it, but I don't know. I actually made a book. I made a book of Seder-Masochism. I made the Seder-Masochism Haggadah and anti-Haggadah. And I talked about Miriam and that because people are always like, Miriam, do the Miriam thing. And I was just like,
she is a prophetess. So
yes, she is. And her whole thing, well, you know what? Let me grab the book for a moment. Hold on.
I'm trying to remember, but my knowledge on Book of Numbers is not as sharp as it used to be. But I remember that there was like this one name that pops up in Numbers, and there's like a bunch of Oprah book clubs written about this one name. But the intent is like to show how significant a name can be, even if it's only mentioned one time in the entire Bible.
The Seder-Masochism, Haggadah, and anti-Haggadah.
Every kid needs this book.
It's got lots of pictures, right? I wanted a vehicle for the pictures.
God, it looks great. Yeah.
Yeah, let me move that. It's print on demand, but it's pretty nice.
Wow.
Picture book. It would be nice if someone actually published it, but whatever. Okay, anyway, let's find.
Let's get her done.
SYNCTANK Press.
Yeah, SYNCTANK Press would probably do it.
Yeah.
All right, you got a press?
They do.
That's not just print on demand.
It's actually print on demand, but it would be published.
Well, it's published too. You can get it from Amazon.
Why would we even want that now these days? I'm not really sure. I mean, there used to be this thing where you'd you get a book published, and then people would be like buying boxes of their books and trying to push them onto bookstores.
The reason is because, like, I don't know, just to be fair, the way Nina's doing this, like the way bookbinding, we've forgotten more about bookbinding than people ever knew, right? Bookbinding was the most brilliant thing. And like, you look at, like, why would I buy a Nina's like picture if I could look at it digitally? Well, can you? Like, you can't, because it's like a hologram. And this book is an experience. So like, I really do believe that these kinds of things will come back, because people start to realize it sucks to have to open up your computer and to navigate to a place in order to have an experience every time. And sometimes it's nice to have, like, on the wall a book that you can, they might.
Yeah, books are nice. And the reason to publish it for real is you can get better quality, and then the cost per book can go way down.
Yeah.
What is all this? Okay, hang on. Come on. Where is my bit in here? Okay. Got all these songs.
Inner Traditions. Amelia Cataldo has she's an editor for Inner Traditions. You could probably do it through them.
Okay. finding it. There we go. Miriam.
Yeah.
Here's the thing about Miriam in Seder-Masochism, the book.
Mm.
Miriam is thought to be Moses's unnamed older sister who watched over the baby prophet as he floated down the Nile on a raft towards Pharaoh's daughter. Later, Miriam's well is said to have supplied the wandering Hebrews with water until Miriam's death. But in Exodus itself, Miriam is mentioned in only one passage, chapter 15. And Miriam the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her with timbrels and with dances. And Miriam answered them, "Sing ye to the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider hath he thrown into the sea." That's it. That is the extent of Miriam in
Goyim books, but in the Midrash, right?
All right. This isn't. Yeah, I wouldn't call Exodus just a Goyim book.
King James, though.
Miriam's role is expanded in the Mishnah, elaborations on Torah, and further inflated by those who long for more prominent females in their masculine texts. Some set a cup at the Seder for Miriam as well as Elijah. Was Miriam a leader of the Exodus? If so, she would be an architect of the patriarchy that oppressed her sisters. Rather than forming lasting alliances with women outside her tribe, Miriam's loyalty was to Hebrews and their male supremacist regime.
Was she a TERF?
No, obviously not. She was a handmaiden.
I feel like you'll get way less controversy saying that about Miriam than you would about Jesus, but the same argument could be applied that like pod people are Jesus's fault.
Anyway, let me just finish. Perhaps Miriam was a priestess of a local pre-Abrahamic religion who threw in her lot with the Hebrews and their male god for political reasons. In the end, she angered this god by complaining about Moses' relations, or lack thereof, with his Cushite wife, and was banished from the camp with leprosy. This week-long ban was considered a miracle of God's compassion and favor, as most camp bans lasted 2 weeks. And that, sisters, is what happens when you carry water for men.
Oh, snap.
So what I offer as an alternative is Jezebel.
Right.
Okay.
Jezebel was a devotee of the goddess and the archenemy of Elijah. Her religion involved idol worship, reverence of the Great Mother as symbolized by trees and figurines. Elijah's mission was to stamp out such practices per God's commandment, "Thou shalt have no other gods or goddesses before me." After publicly humiliating and executing 950 priestesses and priests of the goddess, Elijah prophesied Jezebel would be eaten by dogs. But Jezebel continued worshiping the Great Mother with dignity and grace. She didn't apologize. She didn't submit. Even as her murderers approached, she dressed in full devotional regalia, honoring the goddess in the face of patriarchy. Thus adorned, she was thrown out of her palace window and eaten by dogs, as Elijah and his God saw fit. Jezebel's gruesome death and the elevation of Elijah sealed the Great Mother's complete expulsion from the Hebrew religion. Sisters, if you keep this holiday of words, 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 pour a cup for Jezebel. We have lost whatever came before words. She was one of the last to try to preserve it.
Wow.
So that's what I wrote about Miriam and Jezebel a few years ago when I made that book.
That resonates super strong. There's no way you're wrong. I feel that super hard right now. Thinking about the Shekinah and the idea that there is kind of this secret in the church because, you know, Josiah didn't win, even with the fall. The first temple being corrupted led to a fall. So there is kind of a secret there, and women are super important. The idea that Mary Magdalene is Christ's wife, right? Like, essential to Mormon philosophy. Like, it's not possible to be a rabbi without a wife. So it's crazy to Mormons that the Catholics believe that he's not married. It's impossible, right? So the idea that Mary Magdalene is following the same tradition of the Shekinah and going back to Jezebel is actually really interesting because they are the same people. Let's do it together.
We're doing shins now? Is this
Yeah.
shin
I'm supposed
time?
to close my eyes because I'm a dude.
Do a little
Are we all
hard.
in the Illuminati now?
This is way better.
We all do like the,
This is like naughtier than the Illuminati. This is,
you know,
but no,
you
I
both at
think
once like that.
he's a 32nd degree Freemason, just so you know.
Oh God, do I have to put my hat on because you said that?
But no, I think it's important. So the loss of femininity, I mean, this is really, so it made you feel like this is an impossible pursuit to justify the rest of this documentary movie story. Unless I have to take it to where its logical progression is to hear both sides of the story. and that was to lead to find like the human nature, or what is it that you were trying to do?
Oh, with Seder-Masochism? I was just trying to find, like, I was like, who's the protagonist then? If I can't relate to Moses, it can't be Moses.
He's an anti-hero, right?
Kind of. I mean, he's just
He's
whatever.
a hero,
He's doing his.
I like your
playing
depiction
his
of
role.
Moses, because he's just like kind of like he's like I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, he's kind of just going along and doing his thing, and then he's not the center.
Yeah, he's Judd
like how often is somebody making an artistic communication around Exodus and not treating Moses like the hero? Like, there's all these things are very unique about Seder-Masochism, you know. But
right. So if there's a hero, it's the goddess.
Yeah,
right.
It's like her story, right? It opens with her, and then she's cut down, and it's really the story of how she is driven underground.
Well, you know, the way you describe it, that you want to have, it's a film, so you want to have a story and you want to have these elements. To me, that reminds me of Wilhelm Reich's The Function of Orgasm, where you have like a book that is just like, as far as I'm concerned, it would stand fine on its own without the last chapter of it, which is all about orgone energy. So it's like I would like, if I want to take my copy of the book and just chop off the last chapter. But I don't, and I by interpretation of the reason why I think that he did that last chapter was because it is a book, and he wanted to kind of like bring everything together and kind of hone it in and give you this, like, here's a conclusion, where in his case, the conclusion, in my opinion, kind of destroys what's really there. Whereas with Seder-Masochism, it actually imbues it because there's an artistry element, and this isn't just an intellectual working. This is actually more of like a synchromystic working, in a way where you're exploring your own relationship to the religion and kind of coming to your own perspective that's unique, you know. So in your case, it imbues it. With his case, I think it works against it. I don't know.
Yeah. So one thing about Seder-Masochism is I decided it was going to fit the structure of the Passover Seder, like the order of the Seder. So it follows that order. And that is not a strong narrative structure. That is like, even at Passover, people get very bored and struggle with it. So it was like, I chose this structure, I committed to it, and then it was like, yeah, this is not really the best.
It's interesting because when you do
basis.
like Rugrats did Passover, and like the way they do it is like the babies are held captive by their grandparents at Passover, and they're forced to hear this story, and then they're engaged, because once you start hearing about it, you're like, oh, there's like good and bad in life and death. You're like, okay, let me hear what happens here. But like, it's not that they were like looking for that story. It's not like they went out to find that story. But once you're trapped in it, you're like, I can't leave. I need to know more.
Yeah, but see, my mistake, or not my mistake, my struggle was I finally read Exodus, right? So I had been, raised with Passover and nothing else, just Passover. And it was always like, this is the story of liberation, not just of the Jews, the story of liberation of all people. It's all about liberation, liberation, liberation. The Jews get liberated from Pharaoh and go to their promised land. But I'd never read Exodus. And like, actually, it's not about liberation in general. The Hebrews are totally okay with having their own slaves. It was just like, we can't be slaves, but we can totally have slaves. And
we're going to release them every 50 years. We're going to,
Exodus is not one of the books that ends with, and they all lived happily ever after. It's not one of those.
No, it's not. So the Haggadah does. It's like, okay, we're liberated. Yay, liberation. But Exodus is like, things get much worse after they're liberated. They kill each other. All these, this great story of crossing the Red Sea and like, yay, and then 2 months later they're killing each other.
Right. Kabbalistically, the story of not just Exodus but the Torah is very similar to the Ramayana in certain key ways, like Ram being separated from Sita and having to find Sita again in the heart of man to deliver her from Ravana, who has her captive. Like studying like Kabbalah, went the way that the exile of Shekinah is communicated. Like as long as Shekinah is in exile, Israel's in exile. So this is not just this is an archetypal understanding that actually has like real world application. It's also the story of Metropolis. Have you ever seen the silent film Metropolis?
Yeah.
Where they put in something in her place. So they take the high priestess, keep her captive, put a robot in her place, which takes it further than the Ramayana does in a way, because it's not like Ram is like, wait a minute, you're not Sita, who the hell are you? So it's like, but that is the Kabbalistic communication, is the stone that the builders rejected, which has to do with when you have an archway and you have a center stone in the archway that's taking on the weight of that archway, like that's the real strength of that structure. And so to say we've taken that out, we've removed that, and we've put it to the bottom, you have to put something else in its place. But the thing that you're putting in its place won't be as strong because it's not actually Shekinah. So that's where you have these different definitions of strength in Hebrew, where you have on and you have oz. So I was discussing this yesterday with Andreas. I've discussed it a lot in the past because it seems to be a very key point for me that in my studies, that it's like you have an idolatrous strength, which is also regarded as lust and everything, but that's what's standing in the place of this during this interim where Shekinah is in exile. But the prophecy is that she'll be reunited with Se'er Anpin, and we'll have some new form of something that's as it stands completely unknown. It's the world that is to come. And so we can only make inferences about that, and so of what that would actually look like. But the best that we can kind of do, it's kind of similar to Patanjali in yoga philosophy, is that the neti of, you can say not this. So you don't necessarily want to say this is truth, but the best you can do is recognize what's being propped up as truth and recognize how it's not truth. So
well, wait, which kind of truth is Oz?
Oz is actually the integrity of nature. So the way
strength.
Organic life.
Strength, not truth. I keep saying truth. I wish it were truth, but no, strength.
Truth is a weird word in itself, right? Truth in Hebrew, there's like 4 or 5, like emet, right? I guess you could say is one of the main things. But then also we were talking yesterday about tamim, right? And tamim is like complete, whole, and that can be a kind of truth in and of itself. Whole, complete, and sound. This is like, it's true because it's blameless and perfect. It's like fully true. Like perfect is a different thing than true. But it's
right. There's also sod, which is the mystery of the thing, and that's one of the things that I really love about Kabbalistic texts, is they make this whole emphasis on mysteries. Like it's okay to be with a mystery. Like you don't always have to like say that this is the ultimate truth of a matter. But in speaking to Oz, Oz is the integrity of the structure of the kingdom that is all organic life, like whether it's lightning or trees or the human body. Like this is all this inherent strength that's in manifest creation, right?
And but Frank then was a Theosophist, and Wizard of Oz is definitely about this,
right? And so on then, which is in the Masonic Trinity of Babel, Jabalon, where you have Hashem, Adonai is the jaw part of that, Baal, and then on. And so, but on is actually like is connected to the sustaining order of the empire, which we can call strength, but it's only strength with dominance. It's this kind of dominant strength that is like man's like hubris. So it's like it has its place in this interim.
On was the name of Heliopolis in Cairo in ancient Egypt. They called it On. That was the name of it at the time.
Right. So it's also connected with the Eye of Ra, and this kind of we relate. That's why in Hebrew the word is regarded as idolatrous, but it also is defined as strength. And so it's this whole question about what is real strength, And so when I'm looking at your documentary, it seems like that's what it's all about.
Documentary.
Or it is a documentary, is it not? It feels like a documentary. I guess it isn't by technical terms, but
fiction.
Okay, well, it's your life, right? You're and it's an interview with your father. So I'm hearing your father's voice, and I'm hearing your voice, and I'm getting a sense
It's interesting because you
your
worked up
story.
to it, that you did Ramayana first. And you're like, okay, now that I've interviewed some like serious scholars from all over the world, I think it's time to talk to my dad. Like that's how I feel.
I didn't interview serious scholars from all over the world for they weren't in Sita Sings the Blues. I had to go for, I mean, with both of them, it was like no matter what I did for research, I couldn't have made it if I didn't have some kind of personal experience or personal connection. Now, if I make another movie, which I really might not, but if I do, it would be about Jesus, I think.
I'll help. We'll get you financed by the Mormons. You'll see.
I don't think anyone would like it, but yeah. So Sita is about God the husband, and Seder is about God the father. And if there's going to be a third, it's going to be God the son.
Oh, this is so good. Yeah.
But that's, I don't know. I don't know.
I want to ask you more about Ramayana because I feel like I've done a disservice by not talking more about it. But I also am interested to talk about Jesus because, like, you know, there's that Young Christ by Anne Rice book. Like, there's a lot that you could do with like the missing years and what people think about Christ. I mean,
there's tons of stuff about.
You can't do it without the part where he goes to the pyramids and flies down, and you know, like the key part. That's where you're gonna get the.
Not as much about as the Beatles though. The Beatles kind of outdo him.
I got blisters on my fingers.
There's a huge Christ fandom.
Yeah, it's true. But some people like his early work better, and they're different.
Yeah.
But Sita Sings the Blues for a second, because we're talking about this idea of the femininity of God, and like
I have to go to bed soon, just so you know.
Okay, don't worry. And if you want, we can. We usually do about 20 more minutes, but if you want, we can stop after this question. Okay. Sita Sings the Blues. What would you say, like in terms of the story? Like you were talking about, this is a woman. This is the real scapegoat in a lot of ways. This is my Jesus in a lot of ways. This is the way you portrayed Sita and what she goes through is really what people should be trying to get out of the Jesus narrative. This is a person who is, you know, she's innocent. She's been victim of circumstance, and the world's how would you put it? Why is it so important to you?
Oh gosh, Sita. Why was she? Well, obviously, I related to her story. When I originally read the Ramayana, I thought, oh, Sita's just a doormat, and why does she love this guy? And he's not treating her right. And, you know, oh, everyone, it's like, what a horrible model that you're supposed to love a man who's bad to you. And then, you know, real life happened to me, and my husband dumped me by email, and I was devastated, and I loved him.
You didn't exaggerate even a little bit, did you? That's crazy.
I what?
You didn't exaggerate even a little bit, huh? That's like literally the story.
Oh, that's what happened. I was just absolutely devastated. And then suddenly my take on Sita was turned upside down.
Wow.
And because I was having a very hard time. I mean, not just going through my grief, but it was hard to cope with as, you know, today's modern female woman feminist, you know, like I was just devastated over this man, and all those blues songs really resonated with me, and I would just play them and cry, and I was not getting over this breakup after a long period of time, which is why I decided to make the feature film.
Wow.
Because I was not recovering. So yeah, I mean, that movie made itself. That movie just used me to make itself. Hey, kitties, my cats are like all over the. Whoops, sorry, going the wrong way.
That's a good sign.
They're banging on stuff and knocking things down. Yeah, I felt like I was being used by the gods because they wanted this film, and they were like, "You are going to make this film," and I was like, "Okay, I'll do it." So I didn't have to do anything to find a way into that story. That story just sucked me in.
While we have you here, there's something that feels kind of important to me that I want to share with you, which is that you've been a huge inspiration for me on one particular topic, which has been kind of the bane of my existence, is dealing with copyright. So like the type of art that I do, I'm the world's leading pioneer in album film syzygy. So if you've ever heard of like Dark Side of the Rainbow, where you play Dark Side of the Moon with the Wizard of Oz, I've been absolutely obsessed with that since I was in junior high, and I'm 42. And so like I've even considered, and it would be too much work probably at this point to try and go back over my previous films, but your copyright is not theft video, I feel like it should be at the beginning of every single video that I upload, because it's
copying is not theft.
Copying is not theft. I'm sorry, I'm tired too.
Copyright
literally is theft. Yeah.
right. But
Tomato,
no,
tomato.
copying. But no, it's the thing is that if you know, when you're arguing for fair use of something, I can't do what I do without using at least the visual in its entirety or the audio in its entirety for different, because I'm taking the sound from one and the visual for another. And I can tell you, like, over the years, almost every platform, whether it's YouTube or Vimeo or whatever, I always get my work removed. And it's like I'm looking at what I'm putting, like, that's basically my life's work, and being told I can't do this. It's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever seen Pleasantville, but it's like when Jeff Daniels is told he can't paint with color, and he's like, well, maybe if you just told me which colors would be okay to use, and I'll just use those. It's like this whole kind of thing. Like that feeling, you know, I've had that so much. And so for you're an activist on multiple levels in multiple directions. And as far as like you doing your art and making it public, you know, publicly available in the way that you have, and kind of like, and also these songs, like you'll go to watch some of your videos on YouTube and they will mute out sections of it, and you have to deal with, it's like, this is this not
the version I
like,
saw saved her video. I saw the whole thing, even the helter skelter part, blisters, everything. Somehow they're learning that they cannot suppress.
Well, I never posted it on YouTube because YouTube doesn't have any provisions for fair use. So the only versions on YouTube were posted by other people, and that's they can do that. But then people come to me and say, "Why is this silent? Is there supposed to be music there?" And it's just like, it's YouTube. Please don't watch it on YouTube. Please watch it on Vimeo. But whatever, stuff gets circulated.
And archive.org. That's how I originally found. I was so surprised that you did Sita Sings the Blues, because I was like, I'm looking for copyleft films. Go to archive.org, find your work, and I'm like, this is crazy. You know,
awesome. Yay, copyleft. Yeah, copyleft. This is stuff that I had my realization in 2008, and I've never looked back. I'm less I talk about it less now because I've been canceled and nobody invites me to talk anymore. But I would love to talk about copyright again, and maybe things will change enough so that I'll be able to. It was really fun to talk about it. It's still really important, you know, culture, free culture, sharing culture, the nature of culture.
Yeah.
I care about that stuff a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I have my website where I have my films, and that was such a you know, personal milestone for me in my life, to be able to have a place where I can put my work and at least be able to share a link and saying, hey, if you want to watch this. But now, you know, you got X. Like, I have my complaints about X, but, you know, with a blue check, I can actually upload feature-length films of my work, and for the most part, it seems like it's okay. I've had a couple removed even from them, but I mean, that's out of well over, I think, 150 now or something that I have up there. Wow. So but you know, it's just navigating that world. It's so painful. And so like your little video of, you know, copying is not theft, just I'm like, oh, thank you, somebody's like, because it says it all for me. So, you know, it really is that simple. You know?
Have you seen this talk that I did in Maastricht called "Copyright is Brain Damage"?
No, I would like to. That sounds interesting.
Look it up. It's like a TED style talk.
Oh, wow. Yes, will do. Thank you.
I'm pulling it up. So everyone, I want to say thank you so much for coming here and like having this time with us. It's been pretty awesome. I want to share anything I can that would help get more people to watch your content and to be, you know, changed by your work. What would you recommend? I mean, I'll put this video in the link as well. What else would you like to share?
I mean, the best place, if you want to see the better versions of my films instead of things that are silenced on YouTube, you can go to SederMasochism.com, and there's a thing that says download, and those will give you the best links. Also, SitaSingsTheBlues.com. And my blog is ninapaley.com, and my store with all this fabulous merch is store.ninapaley.com. And
Wow.
I have so many websites now that they're, whatever. My WordPress is expired, and
I mean, like,
it's
I
a
don't know if
pain to maintain all this stuff. Oh, and then there's apocalypseanimated.com also. Yeah.
I don't know if you ever saw that scene in American Psycho where like he's looking at like the other person's card and he starts to sweat at how nice that person's card is. But that's Paranoid American right now looking at your merch. He's like, oh my God.
Correct.
I'm gonna have
Is
to
this
step
the
it up.
lenticulars? I can't get over.
Oh, I gotta step it up a notch. Yeah. And then you've got Agents of Hag comic book. You've no idea. Like he's sweating right now. He's like, I don't know.
All right.
I'm done. Everyone, please check out these books. Also, go to blog.Nina Paley. Read Nina Paley's recent book. Oceania has always been a war with East Asia. God, I can't even live without feeling like you've been there first. So that's pretty cool.
Well, I have been there first. I'm 56.
All right. Well, I'm 3,000, but I respect it. I want everyone to check out Nina Paley. Dude is a personal favorite of me. Nina, you're the best. Please come back. Let's talk to you again soon. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much. This was a lot of fun.
All right, guys, you guys got the Think Tank thing. Paranoid American. Go to paranoidamerican.com and buy his comics. He's a beautiful man. All right, peace. Goodbye.
Bye.